Welcome back to the U.S. and Middle East since 1783. This is the second lecture in the section that I'm calling Introduction, to try to get into some background for the course, to bring it up to 1783 so we can get rolling eventually. If you like this video as we go along, please leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification button so you know when I post new videos. I guess the first terms I should define are the U.S. and the Middle East. Now, hopefully, you know where the U.S. is, and I don't have to explain that to you. I will explain the historic background of the United States as it was established, because that's important to one of the themes in the course. The Middle East, as a term, is a little more complicated. The State Department basically doesn't call it the Middle East. They call it the Near East. They have the Near East, then they have South Asia, then they have the Far East. The term Middle East, which is what's commonly used today in the media and the press and books, it's what you understand. You have an understanding of the term when you hear it, the Middle East, was actually coined by a naval officer, U.S. naval officer, Alfred Thayer Mahan, eventually an admiral, educator, writer, strategist, naval strategist, influence of sea power upon history. He's the one who came up with the idea of the Middle East. And the Middle East, to him, I think, was the Middle East because if you look at a map of Eurasia, Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East, they all come together. They all connect in the Middle East. Some people have called it the navel of the world. I mean, it's in the middle between everything. You have Europe to the northwest, you have Asia to the east, you have Africa to the south. It's right there in the middle. And it's where three of the great religions of the world come from. You have Judaism, then you had Christianity, and then you have Islam. These are big developments. And you have great civilizations and everything. So all this stuff is happening in the Middle East. The problem is with the Middle East, it's kind of an amorphous term. What would you include in the Middle East? At the turn of the century, when Mahan was writing, you probably would have included parts of the Balkans, which were part of the Ottoman Empire. Today, we wouldn't include them in the Middle East. But basically, today, I think you could say it's the North African coast from Morocco over to Egypt, down into East Africa, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, and then up into, what we think of as the Middle East, the Levant, Jordan, Israel, West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, although in some ways it's a European power, it's part of NATO. It wanted to join the EU. We would still, I think most people would consider it part of the Middle East. Iran, and maybe Afghanistan. And then you've got South Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. And you have the largest Muslim country in the world, which is in Indonesia, which is in the east. So it's important to understand that the Middle East, when we talk about the Middle East, not everybody in the Middle East is a Muslim. Most of the people are, increasingly so. I mean, when I was in graduate school, 10% of Palestinians were Christian, 20% of Egyptians were Copts, Christians. Today, the numbers are less than 1% in Palestine and about 10% in Egypt, because Christians are just fleeing. And it's been like that now for almost 50 years. You have, not everybody's an Arab. The Turks aren't Arabs. Iranians aren't Arabs. Don't ever mistakenly call an Iranian an Arab, because they actually don't, let's just say they won't appreciate that. I wouldn't want to characterize how Iranians view Arabs in general. That's not for me to do. And then you have other groups who look more African than Arab. So it's a big mix of people's ideas, religions. You obviously have Jews in Israel who are in the middle of this area. So Middle East is kind of amorphous, but I think in general terms we know what it is that we're talking about when we use that term. Now, the next term is going to be a difficult one to address and to handle, and it's politically charged, to say the least. What do we mean by religion? What do we mean when we say that Christianity is a religion, Judaism is a religion, Islam is a religion? What do most Americans, and this is really important, think of when they hear the term religion? Really important question. That's what I'm going to talk about next. The problem is, for most people in the West, especially the United States, when you hear the term religion, you're viewing it in a way that prevents you from understanding Islam. And let me explain. The whole Western concept of religion and what goes with it, religious tolerance, freedom of religion, is based on assumptions about, for the most part, overwhelmingly, disparities within Christianity. If you look, what is a Christian? And this is an important one to keep in mind too, because you hear this all the time. Somebody's unchristian, or what would Christ do? Republicans aren't like Christians, or Democrats aren't like Christians. What is a Christian? How do you define? What's the basic definition of a Christian? I would argue the basic definition of a Christian is that a Christian is somebody who believes that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. He was born of his mother Mary, virgin or not, walked the earth, did the things that is said that he did in the New Testament, was crucified, died, and was buried. 3 days later, he rose from the dead, hung around for a while, and then ascended into heaven. If you believe those things, you're a Christian. That's it. That's all you have to do to believe a Christian, or to be a Christian, to be a believing Christian, is to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He suffered, died, and was buried, and arose again. If you believe that, you're a Christian. Period. Now, you can be all different types of Christians. You could be a Catholic, you could be a Baptist, you could be a Lutheran, you could be an Episcopalian, you could be a good Catholic, you could be a mediocre Catholic, you could be a lapsed Catholic, you could be a bad Catholic. Stalin had studied to be a priest. Not a Catholic priest, a Russian Orthodox priest. But that doesn't mean that, maybe Stalin wasn't a Christian at the end. Maybe he didn't believe in any of that. But anybody who believes in those things is a Christian. How they act upon those beliefs is another story. So that's the first thing when we think about Christianity. The second thing is, if you think about Christianity, it's just that. It's a religion. And when we look at religions from a Western point of view, and we see, the dissenting sects in Catholicism, Protestants, and all that, they're all kind of alike. They have a fundamentally singular belief system, and under that, there are all these different things that they do. Catholics do this, Baptists do this, Lutherans do this. Catholics have 7 sacraments, Lutherans have 3. And so it goes. But they're all basically the same, more or less. And you can throw Judaism in there, which is at the time all these thoughts developed. Religious toleration, Judaism was around. Jews were in Europe. Jews were over here. And they get thrown in along the way, and they're seen just as a religion. Islam isn't like that at all. Now, I'm not saying Islam isn't a religion, but Islam is more than a religion. It's a religion plus. Islam is much more comprehensive than Christianity. Christianity rendered to Caesar the things that are Caesar, to God the things that are God. You have church, you have state. In Islam, there is no separation. And Islam isn't just the religious component that you see in Christianity. There's a warfare component to Islam. When you read the Quran, there's sections on warfare, how to wage war, how to treat prisoners, what do you do with captured booty and loot, how do you deal with captured women. All these things are in the Quran that aren't in the New Testament. You can find them in the Old Testament to a degree. But the Old Testament to Christians has been superseded by the New. You also have a jurisprudential component to Islam, because Muslims, or Muhammad, ended up running things in the Arabian Peninsula. So he had to make decisions about crimes, about punishment, about inheritance, and things like that Jesus of Nazareth never did, because he never ran anything other than his own little band of followers. So when you talk about religion from a Western point of view, you can't compare Christianity and Islam. You're really comparing apples and oranges. Islam is a religion, to be sure, but it doesn't fit into the sort of model of religion that Westerners are talking about. It's a religion plus. And it's those, you could really say it's a religion plus plus. And it's those pluses that cause the friction and the problems between the West and Islam. And you need to understand that. Why do we have these differences? Why are there differences like this between Christianity and Islam? Well, the answer is really simple. If you think about Jesus of Nazareth, he was a religious leader. He walked around, he preached, he healed people, he performed miracles, he did all these things. He comes into Jerusalem, gets arrested, crucified, dies, resurrects, rest of the story. He never ran anything. He never had to make decisions. I mean, people ask all the time, what would Jesus do? Or, my favorite, what kind of car would Jesus drive? And it's all speculation. When you come to Islam, the central figure in Islam is Muhammad, the prophet. And unlike Jesus, he had a very different kind of career. I mean, Jesus, from sort of coming out when he's 30 to his death, it's 3 years. Muhammad's around for decades. And Muhammad went through 3 phases. There's the earlier first Meccan phase, when he basically was a religious guy. That's when the key religious elements of Islam are revealed to him from Allah through Gabriel. And Muhammad tries to sell this new religion to the Meccans, and he fails, and he has to leave. He has to flee. So he goes to Medina. And now you get what are called the Medina period. And this is a warfighting period, because what he does is he wages war from Medina with the support of the Medinans against Mecca. And he fights battles and campaigns, and he raids and he loots, and he does all these things. And he's eventually successful. So while all this is going on, Allah is feeding him new revelations about how to conduct warfare, raiding, and all these other things. What do you do with the stuff that you capture? The physical stuff. What do you do with the people that you capture? Who do you execute? Who do you enslave? How do you treat slaves? How long do you have to wait before you have sex with or rape female captives? All this stuff is outlined in that second section. There's nothing like this in the New Testament. Jesus never waged war against the Jewish establishment or against Rome. His supporters, we know Caesar at least carried Peter carried a sword. Because at one point Jesus tells him to put it away. But he wasn't walking around with an army. He didn't conquer, Judea the way Muhammad ultimately conquered the entire Arabian Peninsula. So this is the second element, and it's all in the Quran. How to do all these things. And then he goes back to Mecca victorious, And from there, he continues conquering and controlling the rest of the Arabian Peninsula, putting down revolts, pressuring people to convert. But now he's the civic leader. He's the religious leader, the military leader. He's a warlord, and he's the civic leader. It's like the monarch or the king or the president or whatever you want to call it. And he's got to make all these decisions about what do you do with people who do this? What do you do with people who commit adultery? How do you break up property when somebody dies? Who gets how much share? If there's a crime committed, how many witnesses do you need? How do you weigh the testimony of a man to a woman? And he has to make all these decisions that Jesus never had to make. Taxation. Jesus never had to make decisions about taxation. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, pay your taxes. But he never says what the tax rates should be or how you should tax people, what happens when you die, how does the property get divvied up. Jesus of Nazareth never did any of those things. But Muhammad did all those things. And the whole time he's getting these revelations from Allah, so they all go into the Quran. So when you look at Islam, this is why I said it's not simply a religion. There's a religious component to it, to be sure, but there's also a political component to it. There's a military component to it. There's all this jurisprudential stuff on how you weigh guilt and innocence and criminality, and how do you punish criminality. All this stuff's not in Christianity. You have to sort of ferret it out, whereas in many cases in the Quran, it's just stated. This is what you do. This is the policy. This is the punishment. That's why when I say you can't compare the two. And that's part of the problem. The problem, the mindset in the West is that you have to tolerate other religions. In other words, Lutherans have to tolerate Catholics. Catholics need to tolerate Lutherans. But you're talking about religions that are only religious. Islam is wholly other. It's a religion, but it's got this military and a political component to it that Christianity doesn't have. And that's the problem. Now, I'm going to use an analogy here because I want to make one that, you'll understand, but it's dangerous. And let me make it perfectly clear. I'm going to make a Nazi Hitler analogy here. I do not mean, let me make this perfectly clear, I do not mean in any way to compare Islam to Nazism. That's not my point. My point here, I'm looking at how would we deal with a religion that was structured differently than what we're accustomed to. Imagine if a neo-Nazi movement developed in the United States. They've got the military component of expansion, control. They've got the Nazi idea of how you should run civil affairs. We're going to get rid of all the Jews. We're going to get rid of all the gays. We're going to get rid of all African Americans. But they also claimed that Adolf Hitler had been a messiah sent by God to lead the German people and others to the target he had in mind for them. So they worship Adolf Hitler as their messiah. Now that makes this movement, this neo-Nazi movement, a religion, technically. You say, well, we don't believe Adolf Hitler was God. Well, if you're a Muslim, you don't believe Jesus Christ was God. If you're a Christian, you shouldn't believe that Muhammad was Allah's prophet. I know some people do, but I don't understand how they get there. But that's another question. And again, let me make it clear, I'm not comparing Nazism and Islam. That's not my point here. My point is, how would we deal with that? If we had this Nazi group that was trying to take over the country, whose aim was to do all these things that we don't want to be done, who don't believe in democracy, who believed in what the Germans call the Führer principle, the principle of leadership by a Führer. how could we handle that if they always cover themselves in, religious toleration? You need to tolerate us. You need to accept us. You need to allow us to operate because we're a religion. That would be a problem. Would we let them do that? Would we let them get away with that? I don't know. That would be up to the courts. But that's the problem of dealing with Islam. And again, I'm not saying that Islam is like Nazism. Hopefully I've made that clear. I think I've said it 3 or 4 times now. But it's the same, we have the same problem in dealing with it. Because if you're a devout Muslim, yes, you have this religious element that we should tolerate. But you have a political element and you have a military element in your belief structure that we really shouldn't be tolerating. Because it's nothing to do with religion in the common sense of the term as we use it. And that's what I mean by is Islam and Christianity, you're comparing apples and oranges. They're entirely different fruits. They're both fruits, but you can't compare them. That's enough for this one. It's already gotten longer than I hoped. Again, if you like the video, leave a comment, especially the comments. I really appreciate the comments. I got a few after the first lecture. Hopefully I'll get more. Give it a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification buttons, and I'll see you with the next video. Thanks for watching.